Welcome to the X-Line, the show all about the Fujifilm X-Series cameras and the stories behind the gear. I'm Mark Sadowski, and this is episode 5. I want to apologize for the lateness of this particular episode. The last couple months has been busy. Wedding season is coming into full swing, and I've been busy photographing weddings and editing photos. So it's been a little hectic, but it's been fun. The last 2 weddings that I did, I mentioned before that I was going to rent the Fujifilm X Pro 2, and wedding number 1 is when I used it in tandem with the Fuji X-T1, and then wedding number 2, when I had to give back the X Pro 2, was X-T1 and X-T10 all together. And I've been trying to figure out how I'm going to do that episode because I want to be very thorough with my experience with those cameras. And in that time, I got the chance to interview Kevin Mullins and Andrew Billington. So rather than hold those interviews off, because they were very fun interviews, I am going to pause on my personal experience and bring you the interview. So you're going to hear me talk a little bit about my personal experience, but I mean that's neither here nor there, because in this particular episode it's going to feature the interview with Kevin Mullins, and he's a personal hero of mine when it comes to photography. I admire his work a lot. He is probably the first photographer, and I'm sure for many people as well, he is the first photographer to really show me that you can do a full wedding with the Fuji's X system. And I mean, his work is just breathtaking. If you're a fan of the documentary style wedding photography, or just enjoy seeing candid photography, Kevin is just absolutely on top of his game, and I just think the world of his work. So I'm proud to have him as the first interview for the show. And so before I play the interview, I just want to say that I was a little bit nervous. This was the first. Well, I've interviewed him before, but this is the first time I spoke with him in a while. So bear with me. But it was a lot of fun. It was a tremendous honor to have him interviewed for the show. And without further ado, let's listen to the interview. And here we are with Kevin Mullins. He is a UK photographer who uses the Fuji system. And how's it going, Kevin?
Hey Mark, everything's good here. Well, the sun is shining for a change in the UK, so all good.
Oh, there you go. It's actually pretty cloudy here, so I think we got your weather. So you're a Fuji X photographer. Now, I got to ask you this. Feel weird saying that you're an X photographer? Because the last time I said that I was a Fuji X photographer, or I mentioned I was an X photographer, and somebody says, "Oh, really? Why did you quit?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh no, wait a minute. Let me refrain."
Yeah, no, I do. I think most people in the industry now understand what the terminology is. But yeah, I mean, ex-photographer generally means a person who's given up. And I think in Japan it's probably very different. They probably don't have that kind of terminology, and that's where it's all born from. So yeah, it can be quite a challenge sometimes to explain.
It really is a members only terminology.
Yeah, exactly.
So excellent. So glad to have you here. I've interviewed before. I interviewed you before in the past, and had a great time talking with you before. And I have to say, I'm a personal fan of your photography. Your wedding images are just absolutely stunning. And I wanted to start with what kind of gear did you use before the Fuji series?
Well, up until I started shooting weddings in 2009, and for the first pretty much 2 full years, I was using a Canon system. So I had Canon 5D Mark IIs, and I ended up with a 1DX, I think, and kind of all of the prime lenses. I didn't really do the zooms, but the primes. So yeah, it was a Canon shooter, and I'll never say that it was a bad thing. It was a great camera. It was just a bit too big and expensive and heavy, but the images and everything about the cameras was superb. They were really good cameras, and a lot of people are still very happy with it in their Canon world, and it's all good for those people.
So what was the impetus to get you into the Fuji system? What sparked that interest?
Well, I think if we go back to 2011, there was at Photokina in Germany, which I didn't attend, by the way, but I kind of saw some articles about it. And there was on the Fujifilm stand, they had the I think it was the prototype then of the original X100,
Yeah.
and it was just in this kind of little glass box, and I don't think anybody was allowed to touch it or anything like that. And I kind of looked at this and I read the review of it, or I read a write up of what the camera should be about shortly after Photokino, and I thought, I don't know, maybe this is the way forward for me. I like to really kind of get into the wedding and really shoot it from the inside out. And I looked at this camera and I thought, well, if this can deliver the same image quality that my Canons are doing, then surely this is the way forward. It's smaller, it's lighter, it's cheaper. It's a fixed lens. I quite like that idea of the kind of 35 full frame equivalent fixed lens option. So yeah, so I bought it. I put a pre-order in for the camera, and I subsequently found out that I was on the first batch of recipients in the UK from Warehouse Express, which is a big dealership in the UK. And so the camera arrived one Thursday morning, and it's just so happened that I had a wedding that afternoon.
Nice.
So I charged it up along with all my Canons. It came along with me to the wedding. I didn't use it for any of the kind of important parts, if you like. I just kind of got it out through the drinks reception, and it was slow and it was kind of hunting around for focus. But when it worked so well, and the images were so beautiful, and the ergonomics of this camera were amazing. And I literally, pretty much became invisible. You put these big Canon cameras down and just wander around with this tiny little camera. And I immediately knew that that was the future. The X100 wasn't quite right to, shoot full weddings with at that point. But I knew that this is the kind of direction I wanted to go. And at that time, Fuji were the only option for me. I couldn't really afford the Leica systems, and there was nothing else really that was kind of doing the things that the Fuji X100 was promising to do. So yeah, I kind of got that. And then when the X Pro One came along, I was writing articles for a magazine at the time, and they asked me if I wanted to review it. So I reviewed it, fell in love with it, bought the whole shebang, £2,500 worth of camera and lenses and everything else. And yeah, I've never really looked back, and that was kind of the start of the end for the Canon system. And it's gone from there.
What were your first lenses for the X Pro One?
So I had the three launch lenses, which were 60mm 2.4 macro, 35 1.4, and the 18mm f2, of which I still have those three lenses. And now with the X Pro 2, believe it or not, I'm using that 18mm again so much. It's such a good lens, and it's so light that actually with the X Pro 2 and the kind of speed of the autofocus in that system, the 18mm lens has come right back into its own for me. So yeah, it's 5 years old, that lens, and I'm still using it and loving it.
Nice. So when you made the switch to to all your weddings with just the Fuji system, how was that? Was that like that must have been a slightly nervous experience?
Yeah, it was. Well, I don't know whether nervous is the right word, but I kind of phased it in pretty quick. I knew once that X Pro One came along, I knew that this was how I wanted to shoot full weddings. I didn't see the point basically in using a small camera because it was small, and then a big camera because the small camera couldn't do what it was meant to do. So it was an all or nothing situation for me. So yeah, I kind of I did keep taking the Canons with me for a little while. But pretty quick, I started leaving them in the car. Then I sold off the 5D Mark IIs, and yeah, it went pretty quick. But it was one of those situations where I could see how the cameras would work for me straight away, and I quickly got using back button focusing and kind of up to speed with the focus situation and everything with those cameras. I was using the optical viewfinder a lot, so it was a lot quicker. The optical viewfinder was a lot quicker way to work than the electronic viewfinder in the X Pro 1. So, and really, there's not that much of a difference than using a DSLR, using an optical viewfinder. So, it was just a case of adjusting myself to the different ergonomics of the camera, the different kind of film simulations that I was using, etc. And yeah, I was kind of just go for it and do it. I'm a believer in doing things, just get on and do it.
Right on. Um, just a personal story. I recently photographed a wedding where I used the Fuji X Pro 2. Like it was pretty much 90% of the time.
Hmm.
This was my first attempt at ditching the Canon system, and so I had the Fuji as my primary. I had the 18 millimeter lens on it, and then on the XT1, I
Hmm.
had the 56 millimeter lens,
Hmm.
and it was I had to use I usually use the 35 millimeter lens, but the 18 millimeter I had to use because everything was so tight and so compact, and it was a small venue.
Hmm.
But yeah, it felt great just relying on the X Pro 2. It is substantially faster, and I had such a blast photographing it. And I made the biggest rookie mistake I made was not paying attention to the memory card.
Uh,
And so as I made it through the wedding, the portraits afterwards, and when they were doing their announcements for the reception, I'm having a blast. This thing is firing. I'm not missing anything.
uh-huh.
It was just a blast. Then the error message comes up, memory card full. I'm like, shit.
Uh,
And everything was already in action, and I couldn't stop, so I just had to put down the Fuji and pick up my Canon, and
yeah.
it was just such a difference in weight. It's as though I was picking up the world with the Canon.
Yeah,
After
they are. It is such a big difference, and I think that's the big thing for everybody. It's just the size, I mean, the image quality of the JPEG, especially from the Fuji's, are beautiful, but for people who shoot RAW, that's not really relevant, and it has to come down to size, ergonomics, and kind of speed and stealth, and all of those kind of things. And you're right, there's a big difference between them.
How do you feel about the whole Fuji system and the RAW versus JPEG? Because this is the only camera system that I know of that has such a, I don't know if controversy is the right word, but such a discrepancy in the RAW files compared to the JPEGs. Where I mean, the
Mm.
JPEGs look brilliant, and the RAW files, it's almost like you're really handicapping yourself in the editing process. Um, do you feel somewhat similar to that, or
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if I got paid a penny or a dime for every conversation I had about JPEG versus RAW in the Fuji world, I'd be a very rich person because, and it's a conversation I enjoy because I shoot JPEG, and I shot JPEG with my Canon system as well because for me it's a workflow
yeah,
thing. It's not necessarily about what's best, RAW or JPEG. If I was doing a super important corporate shoot that meant that the image needed to be 65 feet wide or something, and it had to be lots of retouching, then of course RAW is the way. But when you're editing 400 pictures and you need to kind of do it in a timely manner, then for me JPEG works. And I think you're right about the fact that the JPEGs look very different to the RAW files, and that's obviously because of the film simulations that Fuji build into the cameras.
yeah,
And whilst Canon had, to a certain extent, I don't think they called them film simulations, they called them profiles or something like that. And they had like standard and faithful and neutral and various bits
yes,
and pieces. But there wasn't much, they were pretty much tweaked, slightly tweaked raw equivalents. And so, yeah, the raw files are very different in the Fuji world compared to the JPEGs that they spit out. And, it's there's no kind of, yeah, you should shoot JPEG or you should shoot RAW. There's no, I don't get involved in those kind of conversations about which is right or which is wrong. But for me personally, from a workflow point of view, and the fact that the cameras produce such beautiful JPEGs, that's the way I go. And interestingly, you were just talking about the camera, sorry, the card situation on your X Pro 2.
Yes.
Now we have two card slots, and so I've actually gone down the route of shooting. It makes no sense not to use those card slots when available. So, I've gone down the route of shooting JPEG and actually shooting compressed RAW, which is my backup. Effectively, that goes to the second slot. So, if you've got data redundancy there, then use it, of course. But JPEG for me has always been the way, and it was the big attraction for me with the Fuji system. Just, the camera does everything for me. It's like, that's the whole point, isn't it? You sit on the train takes you where you need to go. You get a camera, the camera does everything for you. Perfect. That's my ideal situation.
That took some getting used to. Again, referring to the last wedding that I photographed. I was looking through the raw files because I took so many photos with the X Pro 2 that the editing, first of all, it kind of bogged down Lightroom, the raw files from the Fuji. And I went through half of the wedding just completely disappointed with my edits. And it's not that I missed the shot or anything. It's just nothing was working. I'm like, wow, if only I could. And then I looked at the other card slot that had the JPEG files. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. No, that's just fine. I just wasted 3 days worth of work when I could have just used these files here. So I think I'm done now.
Yeah, I'm in the grey, and of course, there's always going to be situations where, like white balance in really dodgy light situations and various bits and pieces where, perhaps RAW would be the only way forward. But I think by and large, for me, certainly one of the reasons I invested in the system was because of the speed of workflow and the JPEGs and the beautiful images it creates. Especially, I mean, the Acros film simulation, the black and white Acros film simulation is just gorgeous. And I spent kind of 5 years editing images to look like that, and now the camera does it for me. It's like, oh, there we go, perfect.
Yeah, I only took a few shots with the Acros. I only rented the X Pro 2. It's one of these. I mentioned it in a previous episode where I kind of regret what I did back when the X Pro 2 was announced. I had reserved my copy, but then Fuji went ahead and reduced the prices of all their other cameras. I'm like, XT1 is looking really nice. And then when the camera store did their review saying that the X Pro 2's autofocus was just marginally better, I'm like, oh well, crap. Well, I'll just I'll save some money. And I did, and I bought it. I bought the XT1, and I'm not disappointed with it at all. I love the camera, but when I rented the X Pro 2, I'm like, oh God, what have I done? Because this thing is lightning fast, and when you're using the optical viewfinder, it's like, I mean, it's a complete game changer. And so so it's something I'm saving up for now.
Yeah, it is. But the XT1, a lot of people, a lot of people have learned to rely on the tilting screen and the prism viewfinder, and for many people the X Pro 2 just isn't an option. And presumably at some point there'll be an XT2 that they can kind of look at. But yeah, I mean, there is a substantial difference between the X Pro 2 and the XT1 in pretty much every single department. But the XT1 is still a great camera, and I actually still use it. I still take it to weddings, and sometimes I did it on this Saturday just gone during the drinks reception. I found actually I needed to, in order to do the shots I wanted to do, I needed the tilt screen. I needed to shoot from the hip, but be able to look down and see what I was framing.
Yeah.
And so, I needed that. And so it came out of the bag. But it's, it swings and roundabouts. Some people, either like me and kind of just happy to go with whichever one's best, or the ergonomics of the camera are important to people, and some people, with their I think it's left-eyed people would have problems with the X Pro 2. So I think it's pretty good that Fuji are creating two systems that essentially give everybody the best of both worlds, and they can choose what they want.
Actually, all right, this is where you cue the Benny Hill music. When I was photographing with the two Fujis, I don't know if this is something that happened to you, but when you mentioned the ergonomics between the two cameras, like I never got the way people were really passionate about the way they were arguing, tilt screen, the and all that stuff until I used the two cameras side by side, and I noticed that when I was using the X Pro 2, the joystick, oh my God, that thing is such a lovely game changer. But if I was going from the XT1 switching to the X Pro 2 during a particular moment, I noticed that I would instinctively go for the buttons rather than the joystick, and then just mess myself up for just a little second. I mean, nothing that was harmful, but it's just one of those oops. And then I would go to the joystick. And then when I would go back to the XT1, I would be looking for the joystick. And then I would have the moments where the viewfinder, because they're in different places, I would pick up the XT1 and put it towards the side. I'm like, oh, that's not where the viewfinder is. And then vice versa. So like that muscle memory was constantly screwing me up for like the beginning part of the wedding. I don't know if you had any adjustments similar.
Yeah, no, I did because I used the X Pro 1 for a long time, and I was still using it even when the XT1 came out. So the X Pro 1 and the X Pro 2 are very similar. Physically, they're very similar.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did, but I still did. I still find myself kind of bumping things around, and kind of. So occasionally, I've reached down to pull out the tilting screen from the X Pro 2 to find it's not there.
Yeah.
And these things happen, but. It's I don't think even when I was shooting with my 5Ds and the 1DX there was too much similarities. There's all kinds of buttons in different places and everything like that, So it's good. I think it's good that people have an opinion and they're passionate about these things, and that means that they're keen on the system, they're keen on the development of the system.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing.
First world problems, but a good way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So.
Go ahead.
Funny you mentioned that the passion behind the Fuji photography. Now this might be just because I am among the passionate, but the passion for the Fuji photography, I feel, or I've noticed, is unlike any other camera system, where you have people that are just. I don't want to say rabid, but just the enthusiasm for photography is just so much higher than any other system out there. Why do you agree with that sentiment? And why would you, what do you think is that magic sauce that Fuji has that other camera systems don't?
Well, I think you're definitely right. There's a whole lot of fervent passion about them, but I wonder, because I don't move in the circles of, say, the Olympus or Sony group. So perhaps the passion is there too. I really don't know, but I think it all kind of started with the physical design of the cameras and how kind of beautiful they looked and how retro they looked. Now, I actually don't care for any of that stuff. The reason I love the X Pro range so much is because it's a little black box. That's it. It's not, it doesn't have any chrome on it. It doesn't have any, glowing buttons or anything like that. And I would, in terms of the X100 and all of those other cameras, I'm much happier if they just produced a tiny little box, no logos, just black. I want it to take pictures. I don't care what it looks like. That's just me. But initially, I think a lot of people got interested in it because of the way it looked and the way it felt and the kind of retro elements to it. And certainly, the guys that used to shoot film, it's kind of brought back memories of those kind of systems and the tactile nature of being able to use the exposure triangle from the top plate of these cameras. So I think that's kind of where it started. And then, of course, Fuji started really embracing this new, very embryonic community that was growing up around it. and they started doing firmware updates and listening, and taking photographers to Japan, and listening to what they had to say and feedback, and taking things on board and rolling it out, and rolling it out in a timely manner, and not charging people for these firmware updates. And I think that really has impassioned a lot of photographers. And I think if you think about the XE2 update that happened at the end of last year, that was pretty much a new camera. All these people who had an XE2 for 2 years, they basically got a new camera in a firmware update. Same as the XT1 when the firmware update came for that. There's all kinds of new things rolled out, and I think people, whilst you don't necessarily see the Fuji staff from Japan doing their bits and pieces, but they're there, and they're almost like this kind of hidden set of eyes and ears in the community, and they're kind of listening and doing their things, and I think that really plays well for people. It works for me anyway.
I'm personally glad they kept the film in Fujifilm. When you mentioned the film simulations and everything, just the passion they put into making their imaging as close to the original films that they produced, I think is something that is that just gives it a whole beautiful feel and makes it unique to other systems.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like at the first. I don't mean to interrupt. I'll let you talk, but just the fact that it's not just some stupid filter is just, it makes me feel good.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough to be one of the photographers that went to Japan a few years back, and we sat in a room with the engineers, the color engineers, the guys who are creating these film simulations, and some of them are the same guys that worked on the film emulation stock, in the 70s and 80s, and they have this incredible knowledge and appetite for color and contrast, and everything they talked about went right over my head because it was far too mathematically based, and they were talking about hues and contrast and saturation and all this amazing knowledge, and they are taking the knowledge from decades worth of knowledge from creating film and putting it into digital cameras. And so that, and that's another reason why I kind of shoot the JPEGs, because I think, well, it makes me kind of sad thinking of these guys doing all this work and then not using their talent, because when you shoot raw, you don't use it.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, they have these people, and they have all of this experience from, way back when for the film stuff that they are putting into the cameras, and I think definitely that's an appeal for a lot of people.
Does it make you feel sad that Kodak never took advantage of that? It seems like something. I mean, this is something that I kind of lamented because I used to love Kodachrome, and seeing just because Kodak made some great films too. Seeing that, I would like to see Kodak do the same thing, kind of what Fujifilm is doing. And then when Fuji came out with the classic chrome, I was like, oh, that's beautiful. That scratched that itch.
Yeah, absolutely. And that classic chrome, up until then, I didn't really shoot much color at all. But as soon as classic chrome came along, I shoot a lot more color now. There's the history of photography is littered with companies that have been and gone, and who knows what will happen in the future. But I think it's a brave move by Fujifilm really to put so much emphasis on the film simulations. But it's worked. It's worked for them. There's a lot of people who buy into the system because of that, and there isn't really any other cameras out there that are doing that, or certainly doing it as well, I don't think.
Yeah. So back to the wedding photography. Again, I'm a huge fan of your style of photography, as well as what you could get away with. For example, here in the States, or at least here in New England, one of the shots that I absolutely envy is your ability to capture the bride coming down the aisle, but in the foreground you have the groom standing there with his back turned. It's going to be a surprise, and in my mind I'm like, I wish I could stand where he was standing. Because here, that's usually where the priest is standing or the JP, and if I were standing there, I would be lynched by the audience.
We do have in the UK. Sometimes you can do that, and sometimes you can't. It does depend a little bit on the vicar and the kind of registrar. I would say probably 50% of the time I can stand at the front of the aisle when the bride is coming down, but then I'll move as soon as she gets to the front. I'll move out of the way and go to the back of the church.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm at the back of the church, all of the time. But yeah, you're right. It's a beautiful picture, and we don't have the concept of what do you call it in the United States, first look, or when the bride and groom meet each other first in the morning and see each other. We don't have that over here. So when the bride is walking down the aisle, that is the first time the groom sees the bride on the wedding day. So it's it's a really important moment. It's not something that can be repeated or missed or messed up.
Right.
So it's nice, and the nicer the church and all that kind of stuff, the better it is, of course.
Right. So how do you? This is going to be another one of them cliche questions, and I'm sorry, but how has the Fuji really improved your style of photography? Because you are a very candid photographer. So during those moments where, if, for example, you're standing up in front where everybody in the world will see you, how do you feel that the Fuji system has improved your style, or what do you feel it brings ergonomically to the table for you?
Well, it's definitely, like, without doubt, it's enabled me to get more emotive pictures and getting closer, take the picture, fill the frame, move away, without disturbing the moment. I think, like you say about being at the front of the church, yeah, it's obvious that you're the photographer if you're there. But sometimes you will shoot with the electronic shutter, or use the flip screen if it's in some circumstances with churches. But beyond the ceremony itself, because that's only a small part of the day, it's the ability to really just blend in as much as possible. Shoot, I shoot with the X100 and the X Pro 2 with just one hand, and the other hand I'll walk around with a drink in my hand and just raise the camera, take a shot, and move away. And that's really enabled me to kind of get closer and get really the types of pictures that I think and I hope are real memories, that when the bride and groom look back on, in 10, 20, 30 years' time, they can remember actual things that happened, rather than things that the photographer made happen. There's very different styles of photography, of course, but for me personally, if a particular moment in time was happening or was about to happen, and then it didn't happen because of my presence or my circumstance of being there, then that would hurt me. I would hate that to happen. If somebody's about to hug somebody, for example, and then actually they see the photographer with a big camera pointed in their face, and then they decide not to hug and smile for the camera instead, then that entire moment has been erased from history, let alone not photographed it. And because of because of me being stood there. So I do try my very best to be as kind of discreet as possible, moving quick. The camera is nearly always down by my hip. I raise it when I need to shoot. I don't walk around with the camera in front of my face. And you just kind of do your best to get those things. And even with smaller DSLRs, you could probably do that. But when I had the bigger DSLR systems, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't get in and take those shots. The Canon 1DX sounds like scaffolding falling down when it goes off. It's just, you just can't do it. Or I certainly couldn't do it. So yeah, it's really empowered me to get the types of pictures that I really want to deliver to the clients. Which is hopefully emotion filled, real moments.
Yeah, and yeah, I totally agree. That's a very interesting way of putting it. Scaffolding falling down.
Yeah. It was a noisy camera, that.
It was noisy. It was bright. It just basically, and if you had the telephoto lens attached, you're very bright, and it's basically, here I am.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do guests approach you? Because one of the things that I've noticed, if I'm using just the Fuji during a wedding, or that moment where I'm just holding the Fuji camera, everyone always comes up to me and says, "Hey, wow, that's a really nice Leica you have there." I don't know what your treatment is like over across the pond there. How do guests approach you when they notice you?
Yeah, sometimes you have that conversation, oh, is that a film camera or is that a Leica? And yeah, occasionally you have that conversation, especially with people who are into photography. But really, the conversation I have with most people is usually, oh, are you alone? Are you by yourself? Or who are you here with the bride or the groom? Blah, blah, blah. And that's great because that means they don't even think of me as the professional photographer. I'm just somebody else who's at the wedding and by myself, saddled Kev by himself at the wedding. But and that's a perfect thing. But it's nearly it's usually towards the end of the day when people have figured out that actually he is the professional photographer and done the bits and pieces that they've kind of figured it all out. They might have had a few drinks or something, and then they're kind of like, oh, look at my camera, and then they'll wave a Nikon D750 or something in your face, and makes a difference. It's always fun. And I've never ever, not once as a client or even a guest, said anything kind of negative about it, and kind of said, shouldn't you be using bigger cameras or anything like that. The only people ever that ask me that question are other photographers.
Yeah.
And it's never ever been an issue for a client or the guest. Certainly not that I'm aware of. They've never said it to me. And part of my branding, part of my style and everything is that I tell them I use small cameras. That's part of how I work. So they're probably expecting it, but it certainly shouldn't be an issue. And I think it's fun when people start talking to you about your cameras. It's great. It means that you're approachable and you're not seen as this kind of in the UK, there's some terrible horror stories about wedding photographers and the kind of history behind them. So I don't want to be lumped in with that.
Right on. Although when you mentioned the person with the huge camera system that comes in as a guest at the wedding, it's the best jujitsu move that I feel that we could do when they're carrying this massive lens and massive camera. It's like, oh yeah, I have this. What do you got? And you just pull out this tiny thing.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, and look what it could do.
Yeah, exactly. It's a real conversation stopper, and they go off and go and have a beer or something instead.
Yeah. On the bright side, you could sell that and buy this.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's
and still come out on top.
Yeah, it's a bit of a running joke, but it's not far from the truth. But I always say I sold my DSLR system, bought a new car, and then with the change, I bought my Fuji system. And it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's not too far off the truth.
Yeah. Oh my God, the amount of money I've put into the Canon system. It's I don't want to think about that. I am close to making the switch to full-time Fuji. I'm happy that it's coming close. I'm not entirely comfortable with it just yet. The one thing I'm looking forward to is the new speedlight that Fuji is going to come out with. It should have been out this month, but I think they postponed it to sometime in midsummer.
Yeah, I think so too. That's what I read. I don't really use the speedlight systems at all. I'm more of a kind of ambient natural light shooter when possible. So I haven't even been following that, but I know a whole load of the guys who do some amazing stuff with speedlights. They're really looking forward to it, to have this TTL ability and be able to kind of link them all together and do whatever else speedlight gurus do.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that it's been delayed because it's wedding season, and these wedding guys, they want it now and ready for kind of June, July, August. You don't probably want to be running a new speedlight system right in the middle of the season. You want to test it and bed it in a little bit.
Yeah.
But there you go.
But that's all right. But I get what I wanted to bring up is one of the things that's profoundly helped me with my own progress in learning the Fuji system is your website. Actually, it used to be part of your wedding photography site, but now you have f16.click.
That's right. Yeah, f16.click. That labor of love.
Labor of love, and it's totally worth it because I advise everybody who has a Fuji system that wants to learn more, even if you're not shooting just Fuji, to go check that out because your advice in there and your I think early on with the X Pro 1 and those cameras, your workaround for the autofocus system, because when it was a little bit slow, your workaround system really helped coping with that handicap, one could say. But tell me about the evolution of that site, because before it was just on kevinmullinsphotography.com, and then I think you had Owly as a site. So how did it evolve to F16?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I started blogging about my journey with those cameras on my wedding photography site, which is kevinmullinsphotography.co.uk, and I was getting a lot of traffic, a lot of interest in this kind of new system. So I carried on blogging and doing bits and pieces on my Kevin Mullins site, and essentially what happened was my website became more known for kind of Fuji stuff than it did for wedding photography. And so in Google's eyes, that wasn't a great thing. So I needed to reestablish my wedding site as a wedding photography site. Clients, my brides and grooms don't care about, kind of understanding back button focus and all that kind of stuff. So I moved it. In fact, first of all, I just switched it all off, kind of switched all the Fuji stuff off and left it for a bit. I was, had a really busy season, so I just kind of carried on doing my thing. And then I was getting a lot of requests for some of the older articles and stuff. So yeah, I set up the Airwall website, which was a ridiculously titled website. But the idea of it was, somewhere to host all of the Fuji stuff and all of my personal work, etc., etc. So I started moving it all onto there, which was a big job. And then I had another really busy season. And I think it was something like a July 2 years ago, something like that. And I never work. I always take kind of half of July and all of August off, school holidays. I don't actually work, which is a bit odd, but I was a wedding photographer. So that kind of took a bit of a back burner then as well. And then I was kind of thought, well, you know what, I really want to get this out there. I've got a lot of stuff I need to share. And so I bought the new domain, f16.click. Got quite a clean WordPress template on there, and just moved everything across, and including all of the old stuff as well, which a lot of it is it's useful still, but it's not necessarily relevant these days. But I made the decision to keep it there because people are still searching. People still do have X Pro 1s and X100s originals and all that kind of stuff. So
it's going for cheap now. So yeah,
yeah, it is absolutely. Yeah, considering I paid $2,500 for my set at the beginning. But yeah, and so the site, I really love it. I love that F16 website. I like the community that's building up in the comments. I don't get to publish on there as much as I'd like. I'd like to do one big session, one big blog post a month if I can, which is hopefully, what I always try and do is make sure it's useful to people rather than just be a kind of, here's some pictures of mine. I like it to be more educational if possible, and of course I can only educate the stuff that I understand and that I know, and hopefully that's useful to people. That's the plan.
Right on. And lastly, I want to touch on is the video that you recently made on the X Pro 2. Now, just a little backstory. My dad just had a birthday, and when my kids were singing happy birthday to him with a cake, I decided to use my XT1 to do the video, thinking, how bad can it really be? And then I answered my own question. But the X Pro 2, surprisingly, is a very nice video camera. I mean, it's no Panasonic still, but you did a really, really nice video of your artist friend. What was his name again? I'm sorry.
It was Jeff. Yeah, Jeff Ketcher. He's a friend of mine. And yeah, I've never really done film. That was the first thing I've ever filmed. But I talked to him for a while, and I knew that once the X Pro 2 came out, I wanted to do something just to test it really for the video stuff.
Well, that's one hell of a test, because I wouldn't have even known that was the first time you've ever done video, because of the way how well you produced it. But tell me about like how you went into it, because you're into still photography. I would say 99% of the time, this 1% or this 0.1% of the time that you did video. What was it like, and are you going to do more?
Yeah, there's a really good friend of mine called Neil James, who's a wedding photographer in the UK. But he does these great kind of mini documentaries, and he's not a Fuji user, but he is a great videographer and documentary maker, short kind of clips. Um, and I've been looking at his stuff for ages and thinking, oh, this is superb. I'd really love to kind of do something like this, but I have no kind of commercial ambition for that. But I looked at his stuff, and then I spent literally months on YouTube looking at these kind of social documentary interview type films. So I basically drew up a little kind of timeline, if you like, for a 2 minute clip. Spoke to Jeff, and went over there, got the camera, and it was with the pre-production X Pro 2 that I had as well. So it wasn't even the finished body. Um, but it all went wrong. Basically, everything was very different to how I planned it. Jeff decided to just do his own thing and not listen to anything I was saying. And because I'm a documentary photographer, I didn't really, I didn't have the confidence, I suppose, to direct him and say, right, can you just hold on there? Don't do this, don't do that. Let's do that again. Let's take this again. And I basically filmed it as it happened. So, I kind of moved things around, and he just carried on doing it. So it was kind of shot in real time. And then I edited it in Premiere Pro, and I quite enjoyed that element of it. Found the same track, and yeah, always in my mind, I just thought, right, if you keep it under 2 minutes or around 2 minutes, then it can't be that bad. The longer it goes on, if it's bad and it's long, then that's really bad. So yeah, I just did it, and I did enjoy it, and I will do more of it. And I'm interested to see how the next generation of the kind of Fuji cameras come along, if and when they have like 4K video and all that kind of support. I'd really like to explore it more. But yeah, as you say, right now, in terms of the video camera stuff, Panasonic, Sony's, they're the ones that the guys are using, and using them really, really well. So I hope Fuji can kind of catch up with them to a certain extent.
Well, rumors are that the XT2 is going to have 4K, and the X Pro 2 actually is capable of 4K. They just didn't flip that switch for some reason or another.
Yeah, I don't know about the XT2, but my understanding of the X Pro 2 is that, yeah, there's capability, but the circuitry inside can't support it, and kind of gets too hot and all kinds of stuff like that. So I think reading between the lines, the sensor can do it, but the mechanical elements inside the camera can't support it. That's my understanding.
Yeah.
I might be completely wrong. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, hopefully in the future, with the XT2 and whatever else comes out after that, then there will be 4K stuff. And I have a new 4K monitor in my office, and kind of looking at it and looking at all my stills pictures and seeing how kind of you can see spots on people's faces and all sorts of things that you just never really noticed before.
That's an eye opener.
Yeah, it is.
All right, so this is a cheeky question, but who will have 4K first, Fuji or Canon?
You know what? I am so far behind the line in terms of what Canon are up to these days. I would have thought they already had it. I don't know. Do they not have it in the 5D Mark IVs and 5s or whatever else they're up to nowadays? I just do not keep up with it. I don't know. I have no idea. No idea. Pass.
Right on.
Can't answer.
That's okay. Are you going to do more videos?
Yeah, I hope so. I did enjoy it, and I will do more. And maybe in the end it will be something I can roll out commercially as well and do bits and pieces. But it's I'm a stills photographer. I love doing weddings. I love doing that. I will never shoot video at a wedding. It's just not something I have in my makeup to do that. There are people out there who do that really, really well, and they can keep it. But yeah, you know what? I really want to do stuff with my kids, and I really. Something that Neil has taught me is that sound, more importantly, sound, having recording of people's voices is such a powerful thing to keep, as a legacy kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, and sound and video obviously comes together with that. But, I'm talking to you now on a Yeti microphone, and I take this thing home with me at least once a week. and I just stick it on the kitchen table and just press record on the laptop and just let it record the kids eating their dinner and, screaming at each other and fighting over the iPad and whatever else.
Sounds like my house.
Yeah, exactly. And but it's that kind of stuff that, when you're in 50 years' time and you're listening back to that will be a real memories, and video just adds complexity to it, I think, to a certain extent. But I really want to do some stuff with the kids, and I really want to do stuff for the family. And I really want to explore, proper kind of black and white videography as well, which really kind of sings to me. I love that idea of that. So maybe that's what will come along soon for me.
Nice. Well, this has been a great chat with you. It's great to talk to you again, Kevin. Why don't you tell the audience where they could find your stuff on the web?
Okay, well, thanks for having me, Mark, for the start. And my wedding website is kevinmullinsphotography.co.uk. The Fuji stuff and my personal work is f16.click. Instagram, Kevin Mullins Photography, and Twitter, Kevin_Mullins.
It was great having you on. I'd love to have you back on again in the future, especially if you do another video. Definitely want to pick your brain about that and secretly learn from you.
Thanks, Mark. It's been fun.
No problem.
And there you go. That was Kevin Mullins. He is a fantastic photographer in the UK with the Fuji X series cameras. And it was a pleasure having him on the show. And I will definitely have him on some point in the future. Next week, we are going to have Andrew Billington on the show. We recorded just this past week and had an awesome chat with him. And I can't wait to share that interview with you guys. And I hope you enjoyed this interview. It's been a while since I got to interview a photographer, and I think I shook off that interview rust off me. It was a lot of fun, and I could say for certain that it was great fun interviewing Andrew. And I'll give you guys a little tease in that the next interview involves a robot, a baby, and a little bit of flash photography. So there you go, little teaser for next week. And in the meantime, again, I hope you guys really enjoyed the show this week. If you do enjoy the show, head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. That will certainly help us in other people finding the show. And leave us a review too. If you don't want to leave a review, just mention your favorite photography gear that you'd like to use. Which of the X series cameras do you like the best? Are you looking forward to getting? Once again, thank you very much for listening. I'm so happy that you guys enjoyed the show. And we'll see you guys next week. The music for this episode comes from Bensound. If you're looking for royalty-free music for your shows, go ahead and check out www.bensound.com.